Greetings, Japan fans. In today's show, we're going to continue with part 2 of Andrew Hankinson's interview with me. Before we get going, today's handy Japanese phrase is butsu butsu iwanaide. Remember, these are very casual, informal Japanese phrases, so this is something only between friends. But if your friend's whining, whinging, bitching, carrying on, grumbling, you can say butsu butsu iwanaide, butsu butsu iwanaide, butsu butsu iwanaide, butsu butsu iwanaide. This is episode number 431, and this is part 2 of my interview with Andrew Hankinson, which was episode 32 on his podcast, Now and Zen.
Let's move to sales. You know much about sales?
Well, I think there's a lot to know about sales, and I'm a student of sales, I have to say. Yes. I'm a constant student of sales because...
We are both.
Yeah,
I love sales.
It's a profession, I love the fact that sales... I read this somewhere, that sales is what makes commerce, or makes the wheels of commerce turn. Without sales...
Right.
There's no business, So sales is so important, and we have such an important role for our companies and for the general society. It's such an important role, but it's really an occupation that's occupied by amateurs and dilettantes, which is ridiculous because it's such an important occupation. So there's so much scope for improvement.
Why don't they teach sales in school? Why isn't there a class in high school or a class in university just called sales? Because sales is like persuasion, and whether you're actually in a company trying to sell a product or a service, you're always trying to sell yourself in one way or another. Yeah. Why don't they have a class called sales in school?
So in 1939, Dale Carnegie pioneered public sales training, which didn't exist at that time. You had training if you're in a company that provided training, but if your company didn't provide training, you had no option. So he started that. And we've been doing that since 39. So it's a simple thing to get sales training. But most people bump into sales as a profession by accident. They don't think of it as a profession. They don't invest in it. The company doesn't invest in them. They don't invest in themselves. Sales is the easiest job in the world if you know what you're doing, and it's the hardest job in the world when you don't know what you're doing. And so for a lot of people, it's miserable and it's tough. And my first sales job was when I was 16, door to door, poor socioeconomic suburb, selling Encyclopedia Britannica door to door. And I had the training I received was to memorize a 25-minute pitch, and it was horrible, and I was horrible at 16. Who's going to buy an encyclopedia from a 16-year-old kid? I probably looked 13, and I was sort of gun-shy of sales after that. It was only later, when I got the training, that I realised I could do this. Yeah. Because before that, I had no confidence that I could sell anything.
Because it kind of clicks. Once you start to learn some of the techniques of successful selling and how to sell yourself, how to persuade people in a positive way. I mean, this isn't used car salesman type stuff. When it starts to click, it becomes more enjoyable and more fun.
But here we are in the modern age. I'll give you an example. My phone rings. It's an overseas call. It's from Hong Kong. We have Dale Carnegie in Hong Kong. I thought it might be one of my Hong Kong colleagues calling me, so I take the call. He's an Englishman. He's speaking quite quickly. And it slowly dawns on me, this is a sales call about me investing in a Chinese electric car company. Now, in this conversation...
Where do I sign up?
Exactly. So in this conversation, now I'm a sales trainer. I'm a salesperson myself. So I don't say to the guy, listen, pal, get lost, clunk. I listen to the guy.
Sure.
Because I'm interested. How is this guy going to sell me on parting with my dough over the phone for a Chinese company I've never heard of? Never heard of his company either. In this conversation, he did direct me to his website. And I happened to be on my computer at home, so I got it up, had a look at it. There was never one question to me about my financial situation, my liquidity, my current portfolio, what I was interested in doing with myself in the future, my age and stage. Nothing. It was a complete pitch on me using them to broker shares to buy in this Chinese electric car company.
It sounds a little bit like one step above the Nigerian prince who has money that he wants to wire you.
Slightly above, I'd say. Now, and I say to myself, honestly, Andrew, I say to myself, in this day and age, you can go on YouTube for free and get so much sales training. Our website, Japan, Dale Carnegie TV, has got tons of it. You can go and get you can buy books on, I've got 226 episodes of the Sales Japan series podcast. I've published, a book called Japan Sales Mastery. You can get any amount of information you wish on how to do a better job in selling. So for me, why would that guy, and he was a senior guy, his age, I could tell, he was not a 20-year-old guy. He sounded probably 50s, I would guess, late 40s, 50s. How could that guy get to that age and not have discovered that he needed to ask questions? Now, Japan's a bit interesting. I publish articles for Forbes, and I just submitted one yesterday, and I'm talking about selling to Japanese, why it's hard to sell to Japanese people. Now, in Japan, asking questions is not easy, and that's why most Japanese salespeople do pitches. They don't ask any questions, because in Japan, the buyer is not king in Japan. The buyer in Japan is God, and God does not brook questions from salespeople. Thank you very much. Give me a pitch and I'll tell you what's wrong with it. But that's not the way to go. You need to have a little bit of a system for getting permission first in Japan from the buyer to ask questions. And that's not difficult. That's not difficult to do. Once you get permission, then you can understand. So, Andrew, what's your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue, right? I don't know that. And I start talking about our range in pink. And it's this wondrous pink, the best pink on the planet, pink to behold, awesome pink. You're sitting there thinking, I want blue. Now, I'm talking pink, you want blue. So how on earth do I know when I'm pitching what on earth you need?
Sure.
But if I ask you, what's your favorite color? You say blue. Do I talk about pink? You never even hear about pink from me. You hear about blue until I've sold you all the blue you can buy. And then I might say, what about some other colors, But that's a very simple equation to work out why pitching is such a hit and miss exercise, and you shouldn't be doing it. You should be getting permission to ask questions and then only talking about what they need. But so many people come to see me to sell me stuff, and it's like 25 minutes later, they haven't asked me one question.
Yeah.
We've gone through the slide deck, or we've gone through the brochure or the catalog or whatever it might be. Now, here's the scary part. You understand about sales, so I'm sure your team don't do that. I'm sure that they do a good job of asking what the clients need, and they then direct what they have around what the client needs. But there are so many companies who are probably listening to this, their Japanese sales teams are out there going straight to the catalog, going straight to the data, going, no benefits, straight to the features, no benefits, no questions. It's such a waste. There was a particular guy came to see me. I'd actually requested the meeting. His president had given a presentation. It was something about it I liked. I want to know more about it. I said, could you send one of your salespeople to me? And the guy came. He was a sales manager. Honestly, he sat down, popped open the laptop, oyster shell, hits the button. 25 minutes later, 60 slides. I'm sitting there watching this going, wow, when's this guy going to ask me what I need? Didn't ask me. He gets to the end. I'm silent.
Yeah.
And he starts spluttering, blah, 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 Yeah. And I said, go back to slide 39. There were 2 slides in that deck which were relevant and interesting to me. We could have spent the entire 25 minutes talking about those 2 slides. He would have had a sale. There was no sale. I gave that example to you today because there are so many salespeople who are wasting valuable client-facing, or even screen, doesn't matter, on screen or in person, client-facing time, by not using simple questioning techniques to understand what they need, and then direct your answers to that and talk about the benefits,
Yep. Well, you have 2 best-selling books out. You can get them both on Amazon. Your first one is Japan Sales Mastery, Lessons from 30 Years in Japan. And the second book, more recent, is Japan Business Mastery, What You Really Need to Know. These are fantastic books, Greg. You really put into words very well what I know, what I've experienced in Japan for 30 years doing business and doing sales, but I could not put them into words like you have, so well done, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate the compliment.
One question. Japan Sales Mastery is about 200 pages. Mm-hmm. Japan Business Mastery is about 100 pages. Does this mean that there's twice as much to learn about doing sales in Japan versus just doing business in Japan?
Okay, they're different topics, different books. The first one, I wanted to write a book on sales because we have a fantastic sales program. We needed to let more people know about it. This was a good way of illuminating the fact we have this sales training to sell more sales training, which worked perfectly. That is a how-to book. As you know, you've read it. It's very much a how-to book. It goes into great detail.
Yes.
On many levels. Now, this book, Japan Business Mastery, is a different book. This book is written for someone who doesn't know Japan, who trying to get a general sense of the environment,
right.
how do things work here?
Yes.
They may not see. This is what I found. I go in to see a potential client. I bring Japan Sales Mastery. If it's you, for example, and I give it to you as a sales, oriented leader, you're happy. Oh, great. Your eyes light up. You've got interest. But I'd give it to others who are presidents and their eyes wouldn't light up because they'd come up as an engineer or a CFO.
Yeah.
And they'd never been in that sales room. And I realized, I'm not connecting with these guys on something that they're needing to know. And that gave me the inspiration to write this book. So I go into the meeting and I have the books, not displayed, and I'm talking with them, and then I suss out, okay, have they got a sales orientation or not? And you can tell that pretty quickly.
Sure.
If they don't have a sales orientation, I give them that book. If they've got a sales orientation, I give them that book.
Yeah, so okay. The Japan Business Mastery is, you're right, it's a really nice overview of the Japanese business landscape. You also touch on a few of these kind of cultural aspects of like nemawashi and omotenashi and all these type of things. Japan Sales Mastery, on the other hand, I prefer. There are 38 chapters with tips and insights. And what I really like is the action steps summary at the end of each chapter. That's really fantastic. So even if you don't have enough time to read the whole book, just read the action points
true,
at the end of each chapter and you will be golden.
I hope you're going to get my new book, which is Japan Presentations Mastery, which is 81 chapters.
Nice.
Which will be coming out sometime first half of 2021, hopefully.
Wow.
And that's actually, you see, they've got the sun. The other one will have the sun on the other side. So the sun's moving across the sky, if you can imagine that.
Okay.
But that one, again, is very much the things we've talked about, but in great depth, actually.
Well, what I most like about Japan Sales Mastery is that when you look at the chapters, they seem a bit general in that it could almost be any sales book, right?
Yeah.
But when you actually read the chapters, they're very specific to Japan, which I really like. So that's fascinating.
Well, I realized that the last book written on sales in Japan was called The Japanese Negotiator.
Okay.
And that was written and published in the 90s.
Right.
So when I wrote that book, there had not been another book written on sales in Japan for 30 years.
Really?
30 years, yes.
Yeah. Well, when I first started this podcast over a year ago, I had a kind of a go-to question. And that question was, what's your favorite book about Japan that has helped you in your career? Or what is a book about Japan that had influence on you in your career in Japan? And I quickly abandoned that question because of what you just said. There are not a lot of modern day, in the last 20, 30 years, there are not many business books. There were a lot of books in the 80s, like, Japan is number one, and all of these type of books. There's the one, the Nihon de no to ieru Nihon by, Ishiharu, I forget the guy's name. Anyway, Japan is number one, and there were many other books. But you're right, there are not a lot of business books in the past 20, 30 years on Japan until your books.
Well, actually, the second book was a product of that. When I did the first book and I realized there was a
Sales Mastery.
I did that first book, right? And then I realized there was an audience that weren't sales oriented but needed to know. Like, they've been told, okay, you go to Japan, you run our Japan organization, you fix it up. But they don't have a Japan background and they don't really know how things work here. And I realized there was nothing available for that audience. My goal with this book, and also I do a podcast called Japan's Top Business Interviews, which you very kindly agreed to appear on as president of your company.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. They are designed to help people who are being sent to Japan to get some lay of the land before they even get here. So okay, I see. This is going to be different to what I imagined. This is how things work. Oh, this is what these other leaders have done. I should be conscious of these things. Here's some hints and here's some advice. Because no one else is providing it. You go on YouTube, there are tons and tons of, I would call, rather basic Meiji exchange, where to sit, very simple type of stuff, which is nothing wrong with that, But there's a vast amount of information on that. But if you get to the sort of more senior level in a company, there's nothing for you until, I started doing the podcast and writing the book. So I think that's filling a niche.
Well, I like chapter 21 and chapter 18 a lot. Chapter 21 is selling services in Japan. And I've done both. I've sold services and I've sold products. But selling services, this really brings a different level of challenge and frustration, especially for new entrants into Japan, doesn't it?
It does, and pricing particularly.
Yeah.
Is difficult. To get the right economic reward for your service is difficult.
Selling products, there's a market value.
Yeah.
I sell a product. My business, we sell products. They're a higher end. They're a lifestyle product, and they do command a little bit of a higher price. So we can, you could go to a 100 yen store and buy some products that we also offer. Obviously, the quality wouldn't be there. But services, there really is no market value for services. So you really need to sell yourself. Yeah. And if you're a new entrant into Japan and you don't have an established brand name, you may have the greatest service that works in the US or works in Europe or in Australia, but has no track record in Japan. You are in for a very uphill challenge, that's for sure.
You are, and I just reminded every day about how hard that is. One of our sales consultants was telling me recently that, and by recently I mean the last week or so, that because of COVID-19 it's very hard to go and visit clients at the moment. So we're doing cold calling, we're trying to get more business, can't network as easily. So he called this company, target company. The person who picked up the phone said, I quote, "We don't talk to companies we don't already do business with."
Okay. Wow.
Okay, think about that statement.
Yeah.
And I said, well, maybe you just got a dud guy. Ring back at a different time and see if you get somebody else, and you might have a different result. So he tried again. Next person pick up the phone. We don't do business with people we don't already do business with. That is your risk aversion taken to an absolutely incredible height of difficulty for a salesperson. How do you crack a company like that? You don't. You move on, and you find someone who's a little bit smarter than that.
Don't waste your time.
Don't waste your time. Move on. And you find somebody who actually has a need.
Chapter 18 is networking. And I believe that's probably where I first met you, probably 20 years ago, was a networking event. And networking in Japan is very, very important, especially when you're starting out. Obviously, with COVID now, it's changed quite a bit. But I liked one of your, again, it was in the action steps at the end. And one point was, don't sit with your colleagues. And I've always remarked about networking. Even when I take my staff with me to networking events, I tell them, we will not sit together and we will not talk at the event. And so, but networking, I mean, you could almost write a book about networking.
I'm just on networking. I'm at this networking event, and my technique is to work the room. I work close to the door as people come in, and then I work all on standing up, and then people sit down for the meal. And while they're sitting down, I go and work all the tables, the people I missed, and meet everybody I can. Now, I'm at this one table, and I meet 5 people from the one company, and one of them was the manager of the other 4 people. And this particular company is a recruiting company. And I tried to sell our services to this recruiting company, and the president assured me they had their own internal training and they didn't need our services. And here they are, 5 of them. They're recruiters. They're all sitting on the same table, and they don't need our services. The irony was, gripping for me.
Yeah.
But that to me is ridiculous. And when I go to an event with my own people like you, I walk in the door with them and I say, okay, I'm taking the left side of the room, you take the right side, I'll see you at the end. And sometimes by chance, because we're out meeting people, we both happen to fall that we're going to sit on the same table. But we see each other, and go and sit on another table, so we never sit together. Yeah. Because this is your chance. We talk about in sales, you don't know which is the buyer. It's like those old fairy tales about the wicked witch has put a spell on the beautiful princess or the handsome prince, and the spell can only be released by a kiss. And the beautiful princess has been turned into a frog or a toad or something, and the handsome prince has to kiss the toad to release the princess from the evil witch's spell. Sales is like that. You don't know which of these people is going to be a client. You've got to go and kiss every frog. You can't.
I was wondering where this story was going, dude.
Yeah, well, you can't. It's like when I was selling door to door. I can tell you, I was an expert, Andrew. I could walk along a street, and I could look at a house, and I could tell you that those people inside that house were not interested in buying an encyclopedia Britannica, just by looking at the house.
Sure.
Ridiculous, ridiculous. You don't know. You got to go and knock on the door. You don't know. You got to go and knock on the door. You got to meet people. You got to try and create some activity there, and then let them tell you no. Never say no for the client is my rule. Find out more. We come back from the break. Our show today is brought to you by our public programs, but we also do custom-made in-house classes. Now, we do them in our super safe classroom, we do them live online, and we do them in Japanese, and we do them in English. Now, today's show is brought to you by, on the 19th of October, doing storytelling, 28th of October, doing time management, 4th and 5th of November, high-impact presentations, 11th of November, successful public speaking. Our website is www.dale, D-A-L-E hyphen Carnegie, C-A-R-N-E-G-I-E .co.jp. You can email me at greg.story@dalecarnegie.com. If you like learning by watching videos, then we have over 1,000 for you there at Tokyo, Japan, Dale Carnegie TV on YouTube. Get my best-selling books, Japan Sales Mastery, the Bible for selling in Japan, and Japan Business Mastery, as well as my new book, Japan Presentations Mastery. We release 3 TV shows every week on YouTube. The Cutting Edge Japan Business Show, that's a premier business show in Japan, comes out Mondays. Fridays we have Japan Business Mastery Show. Saturdays, Japan's top business interviews, where I interview leaders in Japan from SMEs all the way up to the corporate captains of industry on one topic, leading in Japan. Every second Thursday, we release the Business Pro Television Show. Don't forget, you can email me at greg.story@dalecarnegie.com. Welcome back, and let's continue with the interview with Andrew Hankinson talking to me about what we do at Dale Carnegie.
Golden advice.
Yeah.
One, networking in Tokyo is interesting because if you are working and if you are networking at an event, say American Chamber of Commerce or one of the chambers where it's a mix between Japanese and foreigners, it's pretty easy to network for folks like you and I.
Yep.
However, if it's a totally 100% Japanese company or Japanese
event or whatever,
organization, association, for example, it's really, really difficult to network. And what I have found works very well, say I go with my staff, there's always the organizer, right? And I find the organizer, and they usually provide a list of all the attendees. And I look at the list of attendees, and I find out who it is I want to speak with. And I go to the organizer, and I say, Mr. or Miss Organizer, I would really like to meet so-and-so. And then they will take you to that person.
Perfect.
Because they are the go-in-between, the nakodo. And they will give you the introduction. And it usually pans out quite well because the organizer, maybe I didn't even know before this event. They just organized the event, and I was invited, and I went. But by, I went, so I searched them out, and I get the introduction from the organizer. That gives me already a little bit of a endorsement or some street cred a little bit with the prospect.
That's brilliant, and I do that too. I agree with it 100%. I do exactly the same thing. But I also, I find I have to be the battering ram. I have to play the gaijin card. So I will, and you know this, people standing around, they're not networking. They are at a networking event and doing zero networking. They will speak with the people they know.
Right.
And they will not speak with anyone they don't know. Now, a friend of mine, been in Japan a long time, went to Hong Kong, and I was asking about what's it like there. He said, it's amazing. When you go to a networking event in Hong Kong, everyone is there trying to make money. They want to meet you. They want to see, can we do something together and make some business?
Yeah.
It's a completely different mentality. In Japan, they're like, I don't want to meet anybody I don't know because I'm risk averse. So I will bowl straight up to somebody I don't know. Mm-hmm. I will whip out my meishi. I will pull out the meishi. I will get the card out. I will turn the card around.
He is physically taking business cards out of his business
two
card
hands,
holder right now.
And I walk up to them and I say, domo, domo, domo.
Yes.
And I give them my card.
The battering ram.
And I have my staff with me, and then I introduce my staff.
Yep.
And then I move on to the next one, and he talks to that person. Because for them, being Japanese, to bowl up to another Japanese senior person they don't know,
it's difficult.
and do that for them culturally is difficult. But for me, I'm Aussie, I don't care, I'm not scared, I'll go and do it. But the look on their face, one, it's a foreigner, and they're thinking, oh my God, I've got to speak English. Shock, that's one level of shock. But the second level of shock is somebody I don't know just approaching me out of the blue is the second level of shock. So that is the reality of Japan.
Yep.
You're not going to change it. You just roll with it and be the battering ram. And I'll tell you a funny story. You're a very tall man, Andrew. And I was at a German chamber event. And German gentlemen are very tall. They're very, very tall. I'm about, I'm just a bit under 6 feet tall. They're about like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". They're big gentlemen. And they're talking in German. Naturally, it's a German chamber event. They're standing in a circle. And they're like a wall of these big German executives, right?
They used to have a wall in Germany.
Yes, well, this is a wall of very tall executives, and I want to get in there and meet them. So, again, I'm not scared. I find someone and I tap them on the shoulder. And they look at me like, who are you, And I say, may I meet you?
Sure.
And I try and work that circle because they're closed off. I don't speak German. I don't care. I'm there to find business for my company. I'm there to meet people.
Yeah.
And if they don't like it, that's okay.
Well,
But I may find someone who actually has a need and we may make some business together. And, I've met people through that chamber. But if you see a wall of people standing together talking as a group, and they're talking in a foreign language, not Japanese, I can understand Japanese, you are intimidated to approach that group. But what I'm saying is, if you're in sales, don't be intimidated. Be brave. Go. Try. Break in. Meet people.
yeah.
Because that's what your job is to do in sales.
Yeah, but even at all networking events, whether it's a ACCJ event or another chamber event or it's an all-Japanese association event like I just mentioned, people know that it's a networking event. And they're just kind of defaulting to the safety. So if you do, you mentioned, being kind of like a battering ram. Mm-hmm. However, just coming up and saying, "Hey, I want to meet you," they kind of I've found that everybody's very receptive because they know why they're there. They're just a bit apprehensive to, work the room, as we say.
Yeah. I'm the president of the company, so I get access to presidents. That's a big advantage for me. My team have trouble getting access to the president.
Sure.
So I have to use that opportunity every time, all the time.
Sure. Let me ask you this, Greg. How does one become a better storyteller? You mentioned it earlier. You said be a storyteller, or storytelling works great in sales. I agree. But how does one become a better storyteller?
I'm going to give you a formula which will help people. First of all, talk about the context of the story, the background. Draw an insight out from that story, and then talk about the relevance of that story to the listener. So you talk about context, insight, relevance. Very simple formula. Context, C, insight, I, relevance, R, CIR. Now, if you have that in your mind, when you're telling a story, you're not just telling a story to tell a fairy tale. You're telling a story in business for a purpose. When you are going to business school, when you're writing documents, you're taught to do the executive summary. That is the worst mistake you can make in an oral presentation. You do not want to be giving the punchline at the beginning.
But that's what you just said.
No. What I'm talking about, I talked about context. That's not the punchline. The context is the relevance.
Right.
What I'm talking about there is you start with the background. So if I give you my punchline, right, if I say we have to move into, I'll make it up.
Yeah.
We have to move into Clubhouse. It's a hot new app. Everyone's on it. We have to have a big presence on Clubhouse. This is the best thing we should do. We should put money behind that and get everyone involved. If I say that, I instantly have a room full of critics, of everyone thinking why that's a bad idea, why that's not relevant to us, it's not the right audience, because they're just getting the lowdown with no protection. It's no guards around it. There's no protection around it.
Their mind is already made up about Clubhouse.
Yes, and their brain is now into why that will never work mode, or we tried that before mode, or that failed mode, or that's a dumb idea mode. And so they don't hear the rationale. So in that, business school context, you give the punchline, then you give the rationale. But in an oral context, if you do that, they don't hear the rationale. They stop listening to the rationale because their brain is on fire with why that is a dumb idea. So instead, you don't do that. You start with context. You start with the background. And I'm not going to necessarily go into it, but you start with the background and then you pull out an insight from that and why that would help us as a relevancy. It's disarming because you can disagree with my conclusion, but you can't disagree with my context because my context will come from my experience. It's based on my reality.
Sure.
Now, I draw certain conclusions from that experience and reality, which you might disagree with. That's fair enough. But the chances are, if I tell my story well enough, and we're not talking about half an hour, we're talking a couple of minutes max here, right?
Sure.
If I tell my story well enough, you are leaping ahead of me. As you hear the background, as you hear the context, your brain is going, well, we should do X. And when I get to the point where I say, we should do X, you go, that's right. You already got there ahead of me. Now I have your agreement.
Absolutely.
That is the beauty of storytelling. But people think storytelling is like half an hour. No, it's a few minutes. And now, I don't know. It's a public holiday day, so I can't call your company. But if I could, I'd call your company right now. Whoever answers the phone, I'd say, tell me the Svilling Henkel story in Japan.
Yes.
Tell it to me.
They could.
All right?
Everybody can.
And give me the product story on your range of whatever, Give me that product story. Everybody in our companies has got to be able to tell the story of their company in Japan. They've got to be able to tell the story of their products in Japan. That storytelling goes straight to credibility. And it gives a context. Mm-hmm. So then you talk about why that is relevant to that person. So context, insight, relevance is a good, simple framework to think about. And when we tell the story of Dale Carnegie in Japan, it's got to be under 2 minutes, 30 seconds. It cannot, because we've got nearly 60 years of history here, right? But it's got to be done in that max period because people's concentration spans can't take it. So it's got to be brief, concise, it's got to be rich, and it's got to lead people to a conclusion if you're telling a particular story for a point. Now, in that particular case, we're talking about credibility. Mm-hmm. Trust us, we've been around for a long time, everything's localized, we've got major clients. You can do business with us, right? That's that. But a product would be a different relevancy. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. Storytelling is giving you an opportunity to persuade people before they can disagree with you.
I like it.
And they get so much background, so much evidence, it's very hard to disagree with you at the end.
Right. I love it. Thank you. Greg, you have 6 different podcasts and you post nearly every day.
I do, yeah.
I gotta ask you, can there be too much content?
Yeah, this is interesting. I started with one podcast. I was writing articles for the American Chamber Journal, and this is 7 years ago. And Roberto De Vito was the editor at that time. And I literally bumped into Roberto on the street near Ark Hills. Our office is quite close to there. And we're just having a quick chat. Hey, Roberto, how you going? He said, Greg, you should do podcasts. It was about 2013 or something like that, 2014. And I sort of vaguely had heard of podcasts. They sort of came up and then they sort of disappeared. And I said, Roberto, what's a podcast? And he said, it's blah, blah, blah. And I thought about that. And I didn't know anything about GarageBand. I had a Mac. I had some GarageBand on it. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And being a typical guy, I didn't read the manual, trying to work it out myself. And then I learned how to do it and how to
Guilty
edit
as
it.
charged.
Sorry?
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, I know. I don't need to read any manuals, right? And then I sort of worked it out. Then as I started listening to other podcasts, and I came across this thing called content marketing, which at that time, 8 years ago, was rather new. And over time, I'm listening to different people, experts on this, and people said about, well, look, you should niche down, because my podcast covered leadership, communications, sales, and presentation skills. And in a genius move about 4 years ago, I said, okay, well, I should probably niche down. So I'll break out the sales one and I'll break out the presentations one, thinking, that won't be too much more work. Big mistake. But once you start, right, you're on the tiger's back, you've got to keep going. So I kept on going. And then in August 2019, Google announced that using AI, in addition to text search, they were introducing voice search. And when I heard that, I said, oh, okay. Because I had a lot of video content which has got an audio track in it. And I thought, well, I should make more of my audio content to get found by Google for search for SEO. So then I created podcasts from that video content as standalone to my shows. And then everything was my original content. I would write the blogs, I would record them, be they video or be they podcast, all original. And I wasn't doing the guest format, like you started with a guest format. I wasn't doing that. And then I got this idea about, I know everybody. Actually, I know everybody. I've got all these contacts.
Right.
And I've written this book on, Japan business mastery, and it's, I know all these leaders. Wouldn't it be good, instead of just having the book, if I could do interviews with all these top leaders about leading in Japan and how much benefit that would be to people? So why don't I do that? And then I started doing, for the first time, an interview format. And I probably don't do it as well as you do, because you've got a fantastic voice for audio. You've got a good looking head for video too. You got the whole package. You got the whole.
Not about the voice. It's about the content, my friend.
You got the whole thing. Anyway, yes, you got the good content. You got the voice. You got everything. So I thought, well, okay, I will do that format in that particular instance. So I started doing that, and we've done. I think I'm up to episode 47 now.
Wow.
47. Right?
Well, I subscribe to, I believe, almost all of your podcasts. I really enjoy them. It's if you like the podcast, if you like Greg's podcast, you'll love the book. If you've read the book, you'll love the podcast. So they complement each other extremely well.
Thank you.
The one problem I have with all of your content, and the reason I asked that question, is because I don't have enough time to listen to every single one of your podcasts all the time. It's a little bit of a tsunami of this great information, and I get a little bit overwhelmed.
Yeah, I understand that, because I had the same thing with Gary V. I forget, I don't even remember how I discovered Gary V. And I started following him, and his whole content has just exploded. It's overwhelming. So I understand that.
Yeah.
But it comes down to, there are some people who don't have an interest in sales or leadership, but they have an interest in presentations. Some are interested in leadership, but not the other two. Some are interested in sales, but not the other two. Some people couldn't care less about what the top presidents think about leading in Japan. It's horses for courses, and some people will have a particular area of interest which they will pursue.
Sure.
And so I'm trying to cover a broad spectrum, and I appreciate that, as I said to you before we went live, that I'm 2 episodes short on your podcast because I'm listening to another particular podcast, which I've been, I started with episode 47. I'm binging. I'm back to episode 12 at the moment.
Oh, really?
I'm working my way back through the whole line. And then I will go back and I'll pick your latest 2 up.
Thank you.
So I don't miss those. But yes, I understand that. But I think in the end of the day, when Google's IT algorithm kicks in for search based on voice, with 1,100 podcasts, I think Dale Carnegie Japan will be well situated, well placed to benefit from that particular new technology. And, I'm building for that. And so I remember watching Gary V's stuff that he said, for years he did wine library once a week, him, camera, wine bottles, disguise, tasting, talking, commenting on the wine, taking the bag off the wine, oh, that's such and such. And no one was watching it. No one was watching it. But eventually they watched it. And he's now got a very successful business. He's a legend. He's just, everyone knows who Gary Vee is, basically, if you're in marketing. And I'm not Gary Vee. I don't have that degree of personality. He's a very spectacular person in that sense. But I'm trying to take at least part of a leaf out of his book.
Well, you have a lot of his passion, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm passionate. That's true. That's true.
Good. With this pandemic, how will the sales process or the way sales are conducted change in the future?
It's really going to become so much more complex. Getting to a decision maker has always been difficult.
True.
So you're using referrals, you're using networking to do that. In a normal world where we're not sitting at home, we can generally find an opportunity to connect with a decision maker and have a business conversation. The first thing we all noticed was we're sitting at home, and so are they. So you ring the company, somebody is there picking up the phone. They're not a decision maker, they're a blocker. And the gatekeeper will not let you through. They will not give you the phone number of the person you want to speak to. They often don't offer to take a message. You have to ask them to take a message. And even if they take a message, that person will not call you back. So how on earth do you expand in this environment beyond your current crop of existing clients? The answer is you don't. And that's been the problem for everybody. We have very limited ability to reach out to people and try and make new clients. It's been just abominable.
But that's the cold call. But that is the cold calling part of the process.
Yeah.
That's just one part. So I totally agree with that. That's going to be extremely difficult. That was getting more difficult even before. But what about just existing clients, about new presentations, about new proposals, a little bit further down the line rather than cold calling, because I think everybody understands that challenge.
Yeah.
But just the general.
Yeah, I think, again, even with existing clients, again, it's going to determine itself based on your quality, based on the quality of your relationship with that client, right? So it varies. Some you have a light relationship with, others you have a deep relationship with, that varies. But let's just talk about how you engage. Now, the beauty of COVID in a way is it's forced everybody online internally in their companies. So they have learnt to come online through whichever platform they're using, Teams, Skype, Google, whatever it is they're using,
Zoom.
WebEx, Zoom, whatever, right? So they are in that environment. The problem, though, is how do you engage the buyer in that limited environment? Now, we've been doing this for a year now, right? It's a year, basically, when everyone, February, right? Basically, people started to go home, started to have online meetings. And so what do I see? I go online and I attend meetings and I see people who've put their laptop on their table, so they're getting the camera lens shooting up their nose. They have not got the camera lens adjusted to eye height. And they are talking 10 centimetres from the lens down onto the screen where the faces are, instead of talking to the camera, because that's what the person on the other end sees. It's quite disconcerting, I know, but that's where you've got to be. No. And also, the screen, the medium of the screen robs your energy of about 20%. People who are in television know they have to up the ante by about 20% when they're in front of a camera to have the same level of energy they'd have normally.
Same with the big venue and giving presentations.
Exactly, as we mentioned before. So you've got to up the ante on your energy. Plus, you've got to have some means, again, like you do in a normal meeting, of establishing that human connection again. So don't get straight down to business. I remember a Greek president. He was working for a particular
I thought
company.
you were going to pull out some Greek mythology on me here.
No, but we had a first meeting, and I started to do a little bit of small talk to build up the relationship. After 5 seconds, he said, "Okay, let's get down to business."
Hey, Greeks love small talk.
So he'd just come out of America, and
I used to do business in Greece, and you know what I called Greece? Greece was like the Jamaica of Europe.
Wow. Okay. Very good.
These guys had no sense of time whatsoever. I would go to a meeting. I would say, "Oh, I'm here to meet Mr. So-and-so Alopoulos at 10 o'clock." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, he'll be here around 11.
Yeah. Well, this was a very international Greek president working for a foreign company, and he just arrived in Japan. I thought, wow, you're going to have a lot of trouble here with that. You start dealing with Japanese. So small talk, you need to have that. And it should be something about them. You want them talking. You don't want to be talking. I mean, any rule in sales says that you should be talking 20% of the time max. They should be speaking 80% of the time. And if you hear yourself talking too much, shut up and ask a question. So you want to start that meeting with an icebreaker about them, you know.
People love to talk about themselves.
Well, for example, you know, if you're an existing client, I might say, well, Andrew, you've got quite a lot of people in your company. Has everyone been okay? No one has had any serious illnesses from COVID so far, because it's been a year now. Is everyone okay? And you're happy to hear that question because it's showing some care about your staff members. And then I'm talking about what you're interested in. And you talk about that a little bit, and you're talking now.
Yeah.
And I might ask some further follow-up questions, and we start to warm the conversation up, and we're doing a light conversation that's not about business, but it's sort of semi-business related, but you're doing the talking, not me. And then I can gauge your mood, I can gauge your concentration, I can gauge your feeling, I can get some sense of how you are today. And then I could bridge into some business and have some questions about any particular things which have come up because of COVID, which are an issue for you.
Sure. Is
there something that's a concern? You know,
yeah.
I think we might be able to help you with it.
That's
We
good.
go from there. So
I
think that showing some sensitivity to that person's situation is important, and it might be about them personally, it might be your family. You know, if they're Japanese, I might say, I'm not sure if you have a big extended family in Japan, but I hope that everyone's okay. Has anyone in your family had any issues with COVID?
Empathy.
Okay? Empathy, exactly. Empathy.
Yeah.
And then they say, yeah, everything's fine. I say, oh, good. How about the company? Everyone's good. And just that little bit of care, thinking about them. And again, when I hear you speak, I can get a sense of your mood. I can get a sense of how much stress you're under,
Sure.
how much time you've got. And of course, I'll ask you, how are you going for time today? I know you're extremely busy. Are we okay? You know, and you've had this experience. You know, people tell you, look, we're so busy. I've only got 15 minutes to talk to you, you know.
Yeah, I've had that
And
ultimatum before.
And you wind up speaking for an hour and a half. Because there's something about what you're doing which is relevant and interesting for them, and they're happy to make the time because it's relevant, interesting. But they don't see the relevance or the interest because they think you're going to sell them something, so they've got this mental block. But if you're dealing with their needs, if you're dealing with their requirements, then the whole conversation is of interest to them.
You touch on something right there that reminded me that I want to ask you. That when people think of sales, they think about the act of persuading someone to buy their product or service. But it's my belief the most important thing you could ever sell is selling yourself. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, especially in Japan. Because this is a country where no defects, no mistakes allowed. And when I was in Austrade, helping Australian companies to export products to Japan, we had a Brisbane company, my hometown, got a business to export bark to Japan for gardens.
Bark?
Yeah, there was a gardening boom in the 90s. But the bark had to be no twigs, no pebbles, no sand, pure bark. Okay. And bark, you can crush bark into a container and you send it up to Japan and you sell it into the home garden market. So the day that the boat is supposed to depart for Japan, the guy rings me up and he says, oh, by the way, we missed the boat, but don't worry, it'll be on the next boat. So we ring the Japanese customer.
Strike one.
And tell the Japanese customer the good news. And one of my Japanese staff was having this conversation. I'm not exaggerating. She had the phone, a handheld phone, the extension of her arm length away from her ear, and all of us in the office could hear the client screaming.
Really?
So angry. Well, why? Because this is a just-in-time, we don't hold a lot of stock country where that client of ours was going to supply a whole bunch of people down the food chain with their supply of bark who could now not meet that requirement and had burnt their trust. All those relationships burnt because our supplier did not meet the requirement of at least getting the product on the damn boat.
Well, that goes back to your comment about that the customer is not king, the customer is God. And many Japanese companies are not that great at managing expectations.
Well, it comes back to our point, right, about trust is so important. And so when you meet someone, they're looking at you, whether you're Japanese or a foreigner, and they're going, can I trust this person? So if your card says, Mitsubishi Heavy or something, then, okay, that's a huge company and there's a certain amount of built-in trust. They don't know you. They're thinking, I don't want to have any problem. But if you've got a big name brand on your Meishi, you've got built-in trust. They buy the company brand. The problem is the person themselves has also got a responsibility to bring that trust to the relationship so that they buy you and they buy the company.
That goes back to, exactly, selling yourself.
Selling yourself. And that's why that trust is so critical. So your capacity to be, understanding the client's needs, being very precise about expectations management, about follow-up, about keeping in touch, these things are critical. And so Japan, in a sense, it's very demanding, but if you know what is demanded, then you can supply that demand.
Perfect. Speaking of passion, what is your favorite Japanese word that doesn't have an exact English translation?
Okay. Have you ever done any martial arts in Japan?
I have.
What did you do?
I did karate, Shorinji Kempo, and currently I'm doing Krav Maga, although that's not Japanese.
That's Israeli, yeah. We don't count that one. So you will know the word zanshin. That's my favorite word. Zanshin.
Could you explain what zanshin is? Explain it as if you would explain it to your young 13-year-old nephew back in Australia.
Great. So if we take it's a compound word of two characters, and the zan means to remain, nokoru, to remain. And shin, you could write it as presence or spirit. So
what's the kanji? The shin is heart?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it means that you have a resonance beyond your presence. Now, in the martial arts, as you know, having done Shorinji Kempo, having done karate, that when you do a technique, when you strike the opponent, you don't turn your back and walk away. You don't drop your guard. You might hit the opponent. You might miss the opponent. It doesn't matter. You are still 100% concentrated on your opponent. After the blow, kick or punch or combination, it doesn't matter. That alertness, that is zanshin. That is the true warrior who does not relax until the opponent has been completely neutralized. That presence of mind, that having that spirit remaining there, that energy is still there. So for me, I like that word because I didn't coin the term. It was that Steve Jobs talked about a dent in the universe. I think it was Steve Jobs. I think I've read that somewhere. Maybe I've got that wrong. But anyway, some very smart person, smarter than me, talked about having a dent in the universe. I think all of us should try and have a dent in the universe somehow in our lives and have something that remains, that we leave something good behind for our companies, our families, society, that we have a presence that goes beyond our physical being here in the room at the time so that we make things better for other people. So it combines nicely with my Dale Carnegie's thinking about principles, human relations. It all works together. But this month actually is the 50th anniversary of my starting karate training.
Congratulations.
Yeah, 50 this month of February. I started in 1971 in Brisbane. And, that changed my life completely. So that remained, the spirit of karate has remained with me, will remain with me my whole life. And There was a book by Peter Urban called The Karate Dojo, and he had some beautiful drawings in the book. And one of them was a guy had a hachimaku
Headband.
Headband on, and he's in a cat stance and neko shidachi, and it says, karate training has changed his life. He'll never be the same person again. And that was me. That was the zanshin of karate training. Took a very shy, poor, lacking in confidence young man who had nothing going for him, was lost, and gave him the spirit to survive and to fight and to challenge. And that remains in me, regardless of what I'm doing in any aspect of my life. So zanshin for me is a very key word. And luckily you're a martial artist, so you understand what I'm talking about. And anyone who's listening to this as a martial artist will know exactly what I'm talking about.
But for those people that are not martial artists, how would you translate that into English in just kind of like one word or two words?
Okay. If you had a deep chime or something like that you struck, like if you go to a Buddhist ceremony, they're striking these bells, brass bells.
Like the beginning of my podcast.
Right, yes. And there's a reverberation from that. And some chimes have quite a long reverberation.
True.
It's like a reverberation of your spirit. So that it goes beyond the striking of the bell, it reverberates past that. And so your presence reverberates past that moment, whether you said something or did something, it reverberates long, long, long past that. So, when I'm gone, I'm in another place, wherever that will be, I don't know. I hope that I have left something.
Kawasaki.
Why Kawasaki? I don't know. Kawasaki, whatever. But anyway, that I leave something on this planet that will be for good and help people and reverberate beyond my life. And so when I'm teaching in my Dale Carnegie area, if I was teaching karate, I taught karate for a long time, that I leave something better than what I found and that I help people. Zanshin is the word for me.
I love it. I love Zanshin, and we're going to leave with that. And I want to thank you, Greg, so much for your time today. I encourage anyone who wants to become competent and confident in presentations, in public speaking, and in leadership to take a look at Dale Carnegie Japan. Also look up Greg's story on LinkedIn. He has all of his links there and all the links to all of his podcasts, all 6 of them. A lot of content there, but they are very worthwhile, as well as his books, Japan Business Mastery and Japan Sales Mastery. Thank you so much for your time today, Greg.
Andrew, I admire your program, and it's a pleasure for me to be a guest on your program. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining the Leadership Japan series. If you found the program useful, then share it with your family, friends, and colleagues. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast. Take what you found valuable, immediately put into action, because idea application is what makes winners winners. Be one of them. Remember, I'm your corporate coaching and training guy in your corner, committed to your success here in Nippon.